In 1975 Moscow, factory worker Dmitry Sokolov joined the housing waiting list. The average wait, 10 to 20 years. His children would be grown before he got his own walls. 15 years earlier, Khrushchev had promised communism and apartments for all by 1980. The concrete towers rose everywhere, yet families kept waiting. This is their story. It is January 14th, 1975. You are standing on the corner of Avtozavodskaya Street in the southern industrial district of Moscow. The time is 6:45 a.m. The sun hasn't risen yet, and the city is submerged in a heavy, freezing fog. The temperature is 22 degrees below zero. The air tastes metallic, a mixture of low-grade diesel exhaust and the sulfurous smoke pouring from the chimneys of the Likhachev automotive plant, the behemoth known to every Soviet citizen as ZIL. You are surrounded by a sea of gray. Thousands of men in heavy woolen coats and fur shapka hats are marching silently toward the factory gates. They look like a defeated army, their boots crunching in unison on the hard-packed black snow. Among them is Dmitry Sokolov. He is 32 years old. He is a welder, a shock worker who exceeds his quota every month, but he does not have a home. Dmitry lives in a dormitory, an общежитие. It is a 5-story brick building where the hallways smell of boiling cabbage, wet wool, and cheap Prima tobacco. He shares a single room with 3 other men. His private space is a metal cot and the suitcase shoved underneath it. If he wants to read, he does it while his roommates snore or drink vodka. If he wants to see his wife, Elena, he has to meet her in a park or a cafe because she lives in a different dormitory 3 kilometers away. They are married, but the state has nowhere to put them together. But today, Dmitry is carrying something more valuable than his internal passport. Hidden inside his coat, protected from the biting wind in a plastic folder, is a certificate from the Bureau of Technical Inventory. This piece of paper contains the mathematics of his misery. To understand the horror of 1975, you have to look past the propaganda posters of smiling families. You have to look at the numbers. The Soviet housing system is not based on money. It is based on a cold bureaucratic equation known as the sanitary norm. This is the first shocking truth that they didn't teach you in history class. In the mid-70s, the Soviet Constitution guarantees the right to housing. But to exercise that right, you must first prove that you are living in conditions that are statistically inhumane. The magic number in Moscow is 5.5. To join the waiting list, the очередь, you must prove that your current living space provides less than 5.5 to 7.0 square meters per person. Let's visualize that. A standard parking space in a Western shopping mall is about 13 square meters. Cut that in half. That is 6.5 square meters. Now imagine living your entire life in that rectangle. Sleeping, eating, existing. If you have 7.1 square meters of space, the state considers you housed. You are not in need. You are ineligible for the list. You are told to go home and be grateful. Dmitry has done the math. The room he shares with his 3 roommates is 20 square meters. Divided by 4 men, that is 5.0 square meters per person. He is exactly 0.5 meters below the threshold. That half meter of missing space is his golden ticket. It is the only reason he is allowed to stand in line today at the Trade Union Committee to file his application. He enters the administration building. The heat hits him, thick and suffocating. He finds the office of the Housing Commission. A woman with a beehive hairdo sits behind a desk piled high with dusty ledgers. She doesn't look up. She takes his papers, she checks the stamps, she verifies his employment.
"Accepted," she says, stamping his file. "You are number 4,892 on the factory list." Dmitry clears his throat. "How long, comrade?" She finally looks at him. Her eyes are tired. The plan says 10 years, but realistically, maybe 15. Next. 15 years. Dmitri walks back out into the freezing morning. He does the mental arithmetic. In 15 years, it will be 1990. He will be 47 years old. His son, who currently lives with Elena in her dormitory, will be 18. He will be a man, perhaps a soldier, before his father ever owns a front door that he can lock. This brings us to the central mystery of the Brezhnev era. If you walk a few blocks away from the factory, you will see a skyline that contradicts everything Dmitri was just told. The city is not stagnant, it is exploding. The horizon is dominated by cranes. The era of the 5-story Khrushchevka, those cheap brick walk-up buildings from the 1960s, is over. They are being replaced by the Brezhnevka. These are massive, reinforced concrete towers, rising 9, 12, 16, even 22 stories into the sky. They are assembling entire districts like Orekhovo-Borisovo and Chertonovo out of nothing. The house-building combines, gargantuan factories that produce nothing but apartment walls, are running 24 hours a day. Trucks carrying prefabricated concrete panels rumble through the streets day and night. The Soviet Union in 1975 is building more housing units per year than any other nation on Earth. So here's the question that keeps Dmitri awake at night. If they are building millions of apartments, why is the line moving backward? The answer is a secret that threatens to unravel the entire social contract of the USSR. 15 years ago, in 1961, the Communist Party program made a specific written promise to the people. It wasn't a vague slogan. It was a deadline. They explicitly stated that the housing shortage will be eliminated and that every Soviet family would have a rent-free, separate apartment by 1980. It is now 1975. The deadline is 5 years away, and instead of shrinking, the waiting lists are growing. Official archives, secret at the time, reveal that over 14 million families across the Soviet Union are currently languishing in the queue. That is nearly 50 million people, the population of France, living in limbo. But Dmitri doesn't know the national statistics. He only knows his own reality, and his reality is about to get much darker. He assumes the list is a straight line. First come, first served. He thinks that if he works hard, meets his quotas, and doesn't drink too much, he will eventually get his key. He is wrong. There isn't one list, there are dozens. While Dmitri returns to his welding station, a different scene is playing out in the center of Moscow. In a quiet office on Granovsky Street, a man in a well-tailored suit is making a phone call. He is a minor official in the Ministry of Trade. He is not a welder. He does not live in a dormitory, and he is not waiting 15 years. He is arranging an allocation.
This is the shadow system known as blat. In a country where money cannot buy property because the state owns everything, connections are the only currency that matters. The sanitary norm that governs Dmitri's life does not apply here. There are special lists for the party elite, for the KGB, for famous artists, for scientists, and for those who know who to bribe. While Dmitri is told there are no apartments available, a brand new, improved layout brick building is being finished near Tverskaya Street. The apartments inside have high ceilings, oak parquet floors, and soundproof walls. They are being distributed quietly, off the books, to the people who matter. But for Dmitri, the deception goes even deeper. He is a limitchik. This is a term that makes native Muscovites curl their lips in disgust. Moscow is a closed city. You cannot simply move here. You need a residence permit, a propiska. To get around this, the state invites workers like Dmitri from the provinces to do the dirty, dangerous jobs that Muscovites refuse to do. They are given a temporary permit. But there is a trap in the fine print. Dmitri's right to live in Moscow is tied to his employment at ZIL. He is an industrial serf. If he quits, he loses his room. If he is fired, he is evicted within 24 hours. He is trapped.
he cannot leave the factory, or he loses his spot on the waiting list. He cannot complain, or he loses his job. He is a hostage to the concrete dream. And tonight, as the sun sets over the frozen construction sites of the new districts, Dmitry is going to learn that even the lucky ones, the ones who finally get their apartments, are walking into a different kind of nightmare. Because the buildings rising in the distance are not what they seem. They look like modern high-rises, but inside they are crumbling before they are even finished. It is mid-February 1975. To understand what Dmitry is waiting for, you have to leave the smoky center of the industrial zone and travel to the edge of the world. You board a yellow LIAZ 677 bus. It is overcrowded, smelling of wet fur and exhaust fumes. The bus groans as it leaves the paved streets of central Moscow and heads southeast towards the district of Orekhovo-Borisovo. This is the frontier. Just a few years ago, this was a collection of sleepy villages and potato fields. Now, it is a construction site the size of a small European country. As you step off the bus, your foot doesn't hit pavement. It sinks into a thick gray sludge. The locals call it the mud era. The construction of housing blocks is moving so fast that the infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, drainage, cannot keep up. A network of wooden planks, known as mostki, zigzags across the churning earth. This is the only way to reach the entrances of the new towers without sinking up to your knees. Dmitry has come here to visit his friend Victor, one of the lucky ones. Victor was a driver at the plant who spent 12 years on the waiting list. Last month, he received the order, the magical slip of paper granting him occupancy of a 2-room apartment in a brand new 9-story panel building. Dmitry finds building number 14, block 3. It is a series 2-49, the workhorse of Moscow housing. It looks impressive from a distance, a white and blue giant rising from the snow. But as Dmitry gets closer, the illusion cracks. The entrance door is propped open with a brick because the lock hasn't been installed. The elevator shaft is empty. The lift motor hasn't been delivered yet. Victor lives on the 7th floor. Dmitry climbs the concrete stairs. The stairwell is littered with dried cement and cigarette butts left by the construction crews. When he finally reaches apartment 204 and Victor opens the door, Dmitry expects to see a palace. Instead, he sees Victor standing in his winter coat inside his own living room. "Keep your boots on," Victor says. "The floor is freezing." This is the second major revelation of the Soviet housing crisis. The battle wasn't just to get an apartment, it was a battle to survive in it. The Series 2-49 buildings were prefabricated in massive plants called house-building combines. They were designed to be assembled like Lego sets. But in 1975, the quality control is non-existent. The concrete panels are often warped. The seams where the walls meet are supposed to be sealed with rubber gaskets and cement. But the workers, rushing to meet quotas, often stuff the gaps with whatever is at hand, rags, newspaper, or sometimes nothing at all. In Victor's kitchen, Dmitry puts his hand near the electrical socket. He feels a steady stream of icy air blowing out of the socket. The wind from the street is traveling through the hollow spaces inside the concrete panels and venting into the apartment. "It's -12 outside," Victor says, pointing to the radiator. "The battery is hot, the central heating works, but we are heating this street." While Victor and Dmitry huddle around a pot of tea, trying to ignore the draft, a very different scene is playing out 10 kilometers away, in the prestigious district of Kuntsevo. Here, in a yellow brick building hidden behind a screen of pine trees, a deputy minister is moving into his new home. This is a Tsakovsky house, built for the Central Committee. The difference is not just luxury, it is engineering. The walls here are brick, 3 feet thick. The ceilings are 3 meters high. The floors are oak parquet, laid by master craftsmen. There are 2 bathrooms,
And most importantly, there is a concierge at the door who ensures that no one from the street can enter. This is the paradox of the classless society. The gap between the worker's panel block and the official's brick house is wider than the gap between a peasant's hut and a nobleman's estate in the 19th century. But it is invisible, hidden behind fences and trees. Back in Orakovo-Borisovo, the sun goes down. The district plunges into darkness. The streetlights haven't been connected to the grid yet. The only light comes from the windows of the towers, thousands of yellow squares floating in the black void. Victor tells Dmitri the story of his first night. "We moved in 3 weeks ago. We were so happy. We finally had our own toilet, no more sharing with the alcoholic neighbor. But then, on the second night, I heard a noise in the kitchen." Victor lowers his voice. "The garbage chute." In these modern high-rises, the architects included a convenience, a vertical garbage chute with a hatch on every landing. It was meant to be the height of modernity. You didn't even have to walk to the dumpster. "They didn't seal the bottom," Victor whispers. "The container in the basement overflows. The rats, they climb up the chute. I heard them scratching inside the metal tube, right behind the kitchen wall. They can smell the food." This is the reality of the sleeping districts. They are vast dormitories for the workforce, designed with mathematical efficiency but built with criminal negligence. But why? Why would a superpower that can send probes to Venus fail to seal a window frame? The answer lies in a phenomenon known as stormshina, storming. In the Soviet-planned economy, everything runs on monthly and yearly cycles. The house-building combine has a quota. They must produce 50,000 square meters of housing panels by the 31st of the month. The construction trust has a quota. They must hand over 10 buildings by December 31st. If they meet the quota, everyone gets a bonus, a 13th salary. If they miss it, heads roll. So, for the first 3 weeks of the month, the construction sites are sleepy. Materials are missing, cranes are broken, workers are drunk or absent. Then the last week arrives. Panic sets in. The storm begins. Suddenly, crews are working triple shifts. Concrete is poured even though it's too cold for it to set properly. Panels are slapped together without sealant. Doors are hung upside down. On December 31st, the commission arrives to sign off on the building. The radiators might not be connected. The toilets might be sitting in the middle of the living room floor, unbolted. The elevator might be a hollow shaft. But the papers are signed. The building is officially finished. The quota is met. The bonuses are paid. And then, on January 2nd, the tenants like Victor move in and realize they have been given a concrete shell that is technically uninhabitable. Dmitri leaves Victor's apartment late that night. He walks back across the wooden planks, balancing in the dark. He feels a strange mixture of envy and horror. Victor has a rat problem and freezing walls, but he has a home. Dmitri has nothing but a bunk bed and a certificate. He returns to the Zil factory the next morning, exhausted. He puts on his welding mask. The sparks fly. He is building trucks that will be sent to pave roads in Siberia, while the road to his own future remains unpaved. But the housing crisis isn't just about the buildings. It's about what the shortage does to the human soul. 2 days later, a rumor sweeps through the factory floor. It starts in the locker room and spreads to the canteen. Did you hear about Grigory from Assembly Line 4? Grigory was a quiet man. He had been on the waiting list for 8 years. He lived in a communal apartment, a komulmalka, in the center, near Taganka. He shared a kitchen with 4 other families. The story goes that Grigory's neighbor, an old woman named Madame Shulgin, had a massive room, 25 square meters, all to herself. She was 80 years old. Grigory calculated that if she died, he could petition the local Soviet to expand into her room. It would double his living space. It would be enough to get married. So he started watching her. He started waiting for her to cough. This is the waiting vulture syndrome. The shortage turns neighbors into enemies. It makes a young man look at an old woman and see not a human being, but a square meter obstacle. But the rumor isn't that Grigory killed her. It's worse. She got married, the whisper says, to a 20-year-old student from the provinces. Dmitri stops eating his soup. What? It's a sham marriage, the narrator continues. The student needed a Moscow residence permit. She needed money. He paid her 3,000 rubles. Now he's moved in. Grigory is back to square one. He tried to hang himself in the bathroom this morning. His wife cut him down. Dmitri stares at his spoon. This is the ecosystem they live in, a world where marriage is a business transaction for square meters and death is a real estate opportunity. But the system has one more twist for Dmitri.
Later that week, he is summoned to the trade union office again. His heart hammers against his ribs. Has his turn come? Is there a mistake? The woman with the beehive is there. She looks grave. "Comrade Sokolov," she says, "we have reviewed your file." "Yes?" "There is a problem. You updated your employment record. You were promoted to senior welder last month." "Yes," Dmitri says, smiling, "a 10-ruble raise." "That raise," she says, tapping the paper, "puts your household income into a different bracket. But that's not the issue. The issue is that the promotion came with a small perk, access to the advanced dormitory wing." Dmitri blinks. "I didn't take it. I stayed in my room." "It doesn't matter if you took it," she says coldly. "You are eligible for it. The advanced dormitory has rooms that are 24 square meters for 3 people. Dmitri freezes. He does the math instantly. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 8 square meters per person. That is above the sanitary norm of 7.0, she says, closing the file. Technically, you are no longer in dire need. You have been removed from the priority list and placed on the general list.
General list? Dmitri's voice cracks. What does that mean? It means, she says, reaching for the next file, that your wait time has just been recalculated. To what? 25 years. Dmitri stands there. The room spins. The raise, the reward for his hard work, has just cost him his future. He has worked his way out of an apartment. He walks out of the office. He walks past the propaganda poster that reads, "Everything for the sake of man. Everything for the benefit of man." He goes outside. It is snowing again. He looks at the massive factory, the smoking chimneys, the endless gray sky, and then he realizes something that makes his blood run cold. He isn't just waiting for an apartment anymore. He realizes that the waiting list isn't designed to give him a home. It is designed to keep him working. As long as he is on the list, he is obedient. He is a slave to the hope of a key. If they gave everyone an apartment tomorrow, who would work the double shifts? Who would tolerate the freezing mud? The shortage is not a mistake. It is the engine of the Soviet economy. And while Dmitri stands there, shattered, across the city in a dark basement on Tsvetnoy Boulevard, a group of men are gathering around a printing press. They are not printing political pamphlets. They are printing fake marriage certificates and exchange orders. Dmitri is about to be forced out of the legal line and into the underworld. It is March 1975. Dmitri Sokolov has stopped looking at the waiting list. The number 25, the years he was told to wait, has broken something inside him. He realizes now that the queue is not aligned to a home. It is a mechanism of obedience. As long as he is waiting, he is a slave. He decides to step outside the law. You are now entering the second economy of the Soviet Union. If the factory is the heart of the state, this is its spleen. filtering the filth and keeping the organism alive. Dmitri takes the metro to Prospect Mira, then walks down a narrow, freezing side street called Bonny Lane. To the uninitiated, it looks like a random gathering of people loitering near a public bathhouse. But if you stand there for 10 seconds, you see the codes.
A woman stands with a newspaper folded into a triangle. That means 3-room apartment available. A man wears a jacket with one button undone, looking for the center. Another holds a sign that simply says, change. This is the obmen, the exchange. In the USSR, you cannot buy or sell land. It belongs to the people. Buying an apartment is a crime punishable by imprisonment, but the law contains a loophole. You can swap your living space for another of equivalent value. This legal crack is where the shadow market thrives. But Dmitri has nothing to swap. He lives in a dorm. He has no chips in the game. He finds a man leaning against a dripping drain pipe. He is wearing a leather coat that costs 3 months of a welder's salary. This is a makler, a black market real estate broker. His name is Pasha. Dmitri explains his situation. He needs a room, any room, now. Pasha looks him up and down. You are a limichik? You have no exchange value. You need to buy a chain.
Pasha explains the chain, Sepochka. It's a complex, illegal sequence of moves. Family A moves to Family B's frat. Family B splits, husband to C, wife to D. Family D is a grandmother moving in with her children at E. And the empty room at E, that goes to Dmitri. The price is 3,000 rubles, Pasha says. Dmitri stares at him. That is his salary for 18 months. That is the doplata, Pasha says, lighting an American cigarette. The surcharge, cash, up front. Dmitri walks away. He doesn't have the money, but he knows where to get it. This is the moment the Soviet citizen transforms. To survive the housing crisis, the honest worker must become a thief. The next day, Dmitri becomes one of the nesuni, the carriers. The saying in the factory is, you are the owner, not a guest. Take away every nail. It's a survival mechanism. Dmitri starts small. He wraps copper welding cable around his torso under his heavy quilted coat. He smuggles out spark plugs in his boots. He steals high-grade tools. He sells the stolen state property to fences at the Rizki market. He's dismantling the very factory that gives him his legal status, piece by piece, to buy his freedom from it. While Dmitri descends into the criminal underworld, the city planners are preparing a new deception on the other side of Moscow. To understand why the housing situation was spiraling, we have to look at what was happening in the district of Severnoye Chertanovo. This was supposed to be the utopia. Designed for the impending 1980 Olympics, it was the experimental model communist district. The plans were breathtaking. Underground parking, pneumatic vacuum tubes to suck garbage directly from kitchens to a central plant, and duplex apartments with open layouts. But by mid-1975, the utopia is collapsing into a farce. The Soviet supply chain cannot handle custom. The pneumatic trash tubes jam immediately. The underground garages flood because the drainage pumps were stolen to be sold on the black market. The free plan apartments are standardized because the factory refuses to retool the concrete molds. But here is the meanwhile moment that stings the most. While Dmitri steals copper wire to buy a room in a communal flat, the nomenclature, the party elite, are moving into the Finnish sections of Chertanovo. They are not on a waiting list. They are allocated these experimental apartments by special decree. Dmitri hears rumors of this. The injustice fuels his theft. He steals more. He takes risks. He smuggles out an entire gearbox in a hollowed-out loaf of bread crate. By August, he has the money.
He returns to Bonny Lane. He pays Pasha. The chain is activated. The process is a logistical nightmare. On a single Saturday, 7 families move simultaneously across Moscow. There are no movers. They use borrowed trucks, stolen carts, and their own backs. Dmitry is the last link in the chain. He gets the key to a room in a new building in the Metrogorodock district. It is a Series 2-49-P building, 9 stories, gray panel. Dmitry moves in at night. He brings his wife Elena and their son. They have one room. It is 18 square meters. They share a kitchen and toilet with 2 other families, but the room is theirs. He locks the door. He sits on the bed. He feels a surge of triumph. He has beaten the system. He has cheated the 25-year wait. But the victory is short-lived. The next morning, Dmitry wakes up with a headache. It feels like a nail is being driven through his left eye. Elena is nauseous. The baby is crying, a high, thin wail. Dmitry assumes it is the stress. He opens the window. The air outside is thick with industrial smog from the nearby rubber plant, but it actually smells better than the air inside the room. He closes the window. He sniffs the wall.
There is a smell. Sweet. Chemical. Like almonds and burning plastic. He thinks it is the smell of a new renovation, maybe the glue under the linoleum. He is wrong. Dmitry has just moved into what historians now call a phenol house. Here is the secret that the Soviet construction ministry buried in 1975. In the frantic rush to meet the storming quotas, the concrete factories ran out of standard thermal insulation. To keep the assembly lines moving, they authorized an experiment. They added a layer of phenol formaldehyde resin to the concrete panels to insulate them. It was cheap, it was available, and it was deadly. When the heating system is turned on, the hot radiators warm up the concrete. The heat acts as a catalyst. The walls begin to off-gas. The concentration of phenol vapor in these apartments rises to 10, 20, sometimes 50 times the lethal limit. Dmitry and his family are not just living in a shoddy apartment, they are living in a gas chamber. The chain that Pasha sold him wasn't an opportunity, it was a disposal. The previous tenant didn't move to the center. He died of leukemia. The neighbors knew, but they said nothing because they wanted his room to be part of an exchange so they could move out.
Dmitry doesn't know the chemistry yet. He only knows that his son is getting paler every day. He knows that his own kidneys are aching. He decides to renovate. He thinks if he paints the walls, the smell will go away. He peels back the wallpaper. And this is where the story pivots from tragedy to horror. Under the wallpaper, stuffed into a gap between the ill-fitting concrete panels, Dmitry finds something. It is a newspaper, Pravda, dated October 1974. It was used by the construction workers to plug a hole where the cement was missing. Dmitry pulls it out. Behind the newspaper, in the hollow cavity of the wall, he sees something moving. It is not a rat. The cavity is filled with black mold, a thick, pulsing carpet of fungal spores that has been feeding on the damp, phenol-rich insulation. The spores puff out into the room as he disturbs them. Dmitry stumbles back, coughing. At that exact moment, there is a heavy pounding on the door. Dmitry freezes. His mind races. Is it the neighbors complaining about the noise? "Open up, militia." Dmitry's blood runs cold. They aren't here for the mold. They aren't here for the phenol. They are here for the copper. Someone at the factory talked, or maybe Pasha the Mockler sold him out to the police to save his own skin, a common practice to meet arrest quotas. Dmitry looks at his wife. She is holding the baby, pressing a cloth to his face to filter the toxic air. He has stolen from the state to buy a home that is killing his family, and now the state has come to collect the debt. But as the door frame begins to splinter under the blows of a police baton, Dmitry realizes the ultimate absurdity.
If he goes to prison, he will be sent to a labor camp. And in the labor camp, the barracks are made of wood. They are drafty, they are cold, but they don't have phenol in the walls. Prison might be the only place where he can breathe. The knocking stops. The door splinters. It is October 1975. Dmitry Sokolov is not taken to a labor camp immediately. He is taken to Butyrka prison.
The heavy steel door of cell 34 slams shut with a sound more solid, more final than any door in any apartment block in Moscow. The cell is designed for 20 men. There are 60 people inside, sleeping in shifts on the wooden podiums. The air is thick with smoke and sweat. And here, amidst the terror of interrogation, Dmitry discovers the darkest absurdity of the Soviet housing system. The prison is better built than his home. Butyrka was built in the Tsarist era. The walls are 3 feet of red brick. They are dry. The ventilation, though primitive, actually moves air. There is no phenol vapor burning his eyes. For the first time in months, his headache begins to fade. He has been charged under Article 93-1, pilfering of state property. The investigator, a man with yellow-stained fingers, doesn't care about the toxic apartment. He laughs when Dmitry tries to explain why he stole the copper. "You stole from the people to buy a home from a criminal," the investigator says, lighting a cigarette, "and now the state will provide you with free housing for the next 3 years. You should be thanking us." But while Dmitry sits in a cell that is arguably healthier than his luxury apartment, the real horror is unfolding back in Metrogorodok.
Elena is alone. The chain has snapped. Her husband is gone. Their savings are gone. And she is left with a crying infant in a room that is slowly poisoning them. This brings us to the unraveling of the great Soviet housing lie. The phenol disaster wasn't an accident. It wasn't a one-off mistake in a single batch of concrete. It was a policy. In late 1975, while Elena is desperately taping plastic sheets over the walls to hold back the smell, a secret report is landing on the desk of the Moscow City Committee. It details the results of the Series 2-49-P experiment. The P stood for phenolic. The report states clearly that the experimental insulation is unstable. It admits that the vapor concentrations are lethal. It documents cases of allergic asthma, kidney failure, and strange, unexplainable fatigue among residents in the new districts. And here is what the committee decided to do. Nothing. To admit the mistake would mean condemning thousands of completed apartments. It would mean missing the 5-year plan targets. It would mean acknowledging that the party had built gas chambers for its workers. So they classify the report. They stamp it for official use only, and they keep building. Elena goes to the local housing maintenance office, JEC, to complain. This is a ritual every Soviet citizen knows. You stand in line for 3 hours to speak to a dispatcher who hates you. "It smells like chemicals," Elena pleads. "My baby is coughing up blood." The dispatcher, a woman wrapped in a woolen shawl, doesn't even blink. She gives the standard answer, the mantra of the era. "It is the smell of the new linoleum. It will pass. Open a window." "It is minus 20 degrees. "Then put on a sweater," the woman snaps. "Next." Elena returns to the apartment. She is trapped. She cannot move. Dmitry is in prison, so she has no way to enter the exchange market. She cannot leave. She has nowhere to go. The Propiska system ties her to the address. The address ties her to the poison. She does the only thing a Soviet citizen can do. She tries to hide the reality with furniture. She joins the queue for a stenka. The stenka, or wall unit, is the obsession of 1975. It is a massive floor-to-ceiling furniture set, wardrobes, cabinets, shelves, that covers the entire length of a room. It is the ultimate status symbol. But for Elena, it is armor.
She borrows money from her parents. She bribes the furniture store manager. She gets a Romanian-made unit. It takes up 1/3 of the floor space in their tiny room. She pushes it against the infected wall. She fills the shelves with crystal glasses she will never use and books she has already read. She blocks the source of the poison with a wall of polished particle board. It is the perfect metaphor for the era, a shiny facade of prosperity covering a structural rot. Back in the prison cell, Dmitri meets a man named Kolya. Kolya is a shabashnik, a rogue construction worker who does off-the-books jobs. He is in for drunken disorderliness. Dmitri tells him about the black mold in the smell. Kolya laughs. It is a dry, hacking sound. "You think the phenol is the worst part?" Kolya asks. "I worked on the crew that built Metro Gorodok. Let me tell you what is inside your walls." Kolya explains the economy of theft that built Moscow. "We had a quota," Kolya says, "pour 10 floors in 20 days. But the supply trucks didn't come. We ran out of cement. So what did we do? We stopped work? No, we mixed more sand into the concrete. Your walls are sand held together by spit." "And the insulation?" Dmitri asks.
"We sold the fiberglass to the dacha owners," Kolya shrugs. "It fetches a good price, so we used the chemical foam. And when we ran out of that, we stuffed the panels with old construction jackets, sawdust, garbage. I once saw a guy brick a dead stray dog into a foundation because he didn't want to dig a hole." Dmitri listens in horror. He realizes that his theft of the copper wire was just a tiny amateur ripple in a massive ocean of corruption. The entire city is a crime scene. The welders steal the wire, the drivers steal the gas, the concrete mixers steal the cement, and the architects steal the truth. The Apartments for All program has created a paradox. The more they build, the less habitable the city becomes. They are building ruins. As 1975 bleeds into 1976, the unraveling reaches the cultural sphere. On January 1st, 1976, the entire Soviet Union gathers around their television sets. It is the premiere of The Irony of Fate. Elena watches it alone in her room. The baby is finally sleeping, his breathing raspy. On the screen, the main character gets drunk, flies to Leningrad by mistake, gives a taxi driver his Moscow address, and his key opens the door to the exact same apartment with the exact same furniture in a different city. The audience laughs. It is a brilliant satire of standardization. But Alina doesn't laugh. For her, it is a horror movie. The film unwittingly exposes the nightmare she is living. The key fits because the locks are mass-produced junk with only 10 variations. The furniture is identical because there is no choice. The buildings are indistinguishable because the human element has been erased from the design. The movie presents this as a quirky romantic obstacle, but the reality is that this erasure of identity is psychological torture. It leads to what sociologists later called vandalism of despair. In the stairwells of Elena's building, the light bulbs are smashed every night. The walls are covered in obscene graffiti. The elevator buttons are burned with cigarette lighters. Why? Because the space belongs to everyone, which means it belongs to no one. The public space is hostile territory. The only sanctuary is behind the reinforced steel door of the apartment, and even there, the walls are toxic. As the winter drags on, the endless wait takes a new form for Elena. She is no longer waiting for an apartment. She is waiting for Dmitri. She visits him in February. She speaks to him through a glass partition. "The smell is getting worse," she whispers. "The neighbors on the 5th floor, the father died last week. Kidney failure." Dmitri looks at her. He looks thin, his head shaved. "You have to get out," he says. "Where?" she asks. "I have no propiska anywhere else. If I leave, they take the room. We lose everything." "It's not a room, Elena," Dmitri says, his eyes wild. "It's a coffin." But she can't leave. The system has designed a trap with no exit. And then the system delivers one final, absurd punchline. In March 1976, just before the 25th Party Congress, a letter arrives for Dmitri at the apartment. Elena opens it. It is from the ZIL Factory Housing Committee. It is a notification that, due to a clerical error in the calculation of his sanitary norm back in January 1975, the error that kicked him off the priority list, his original place in the queue has been restored. The letter cheerfully informs him that his turn for a legitimate, safe, factory-built apartment will come up in approximately 3 months. But there is a condition. To claim the apartment, the worker must be in good standing and currently employed at the factory. Dmitri is in prison. He has been fired. His good standing is gone. If he had just waited, if he hadn't stolen the copper, if he hadn't bought the phenol room, if he hadn't tried to cheat the time, he would have gotten everything he wanted. Elena drops the letter. It flutters to the floor, landing on the cheap, toxic linoleum. She starts to laugh. It is a sound that echoes in the empty, chemical-smelling room. It is the laughter of someone who finally understands the joke. The joke is that the weight wasn't the problem. The hope was the problem. The system relied on them hoping for a future that was always just around the corner, while it slowly consumed their present. She looks at the wall that hides the black mold, the wall that her husband went to prison to buy. And she realizes that the rot isn't just in the concrete. The cracks in the panels are widening, not just in Building 14, but in the entire foundation of the Soviet Union. The oil money is flowing in, keeping the economy alive, but the social contract is dead. The people pretend to work, and the state pretends to pay them. The state pretends to house them, and they pretend to live.
Elena stands up. She walks to the window. Outside, the gray towers of Metrogorodok stretch to the horizon, a monument to a utopia that never arrived. She picks up a roll of tape. She seals the crock in the window frame. She sits down to wait. It is November 1978. The heavy steel gates of the labor camp open. Dmitri Sokolov walks out. He is 35 years old, but he looks 50. His teeth are loose from malnutrition. His hands, once steady enough to weld the seams of ZIL trucks, now tremble. He has served his time for pilfering state property. The debt is paid. He returns to Moscow. He takes the bus to Metrogorodok. He walks to the building on open highway. He takes the elevator, which is now broken and smells of urine, to the 5th floor. He opens the door to the room he stole for. Elena is there, but the boy, their son, is not. He is in a sanatorium in the Crimea, treating chronic bronchitis and unspecified immune deficiency. The doctors say it is the Moscow climate. Dmitri knows it is the walls. This is the payoff of the Soviet housing gamble. Dmitri played the game, he cheated the system, he went to prison, and in the end, he won a prize that destroyed his family.
The Phenol House scandal would not become public knowledge for another decade. It was only during Glasnost in the late 1980s that the archives were opened. The public finally learned that over 5.5 million square meters of experimental phenol-impregnated housing had been built in Moscow. For 10 years, the state knew. For 10 years, the doctors treated children for allergies while knowing they were being poisoned by their own bedrooms. Dmitri stands in the center of the room. The Stenka, the massive wall unit Elena bought, is still there. It is peeling now. The luxury Romanian particle board couldn't withstand the humidity of the unventilated apartment. He looks at the notification letter from 1976, the one about the clerical error. Elena kept it. It is yellowed and brittle. If he had waited, he would have received a safe apartment, but the system was designed to make waiting impossible. It created a pressure cooker of need that forced honest men to become criminals and then punished them for their desperation. Dmitri sits on the bed. He realizes that he never actually left the prison. The cell in Butyrka had bars on the windows. This room has phenol in the walls. It is just a different kind of cage.
As the 1980s grind on, the endless wait transforms into something even more tragic, the Great Disillusionment. The year 1980 arrives. This was the year Khrushchev had promised communism. It was the year every family was supposed to have a separate apartment.
Instead, the waiting list in Moscow has grown to over 1 million people. The Olympics come to town and the city is scrubbed clean. The undesirables, the drunks, the dissidents, the limichiki without paperwork, are rounded up and dumped 101 kilometers outside the city limits so the foreign cameras won't see them. The utopian district of Severnoye Chertanovo is finished, but it is a hollow victory. The pneumatic trash system is welded shut because it never worked. The underground parking is flooded. The duplexes are subdivided. It stands as a monument to a future that was canceled due to lack of funds. And then the empire falls. It is 1991. The Soviet Union collapses. The factory where Dmitry worked, ZIL, begins its slow death spiral. The production lines stop. The workers are let go. But the buildings remain. This is the long-term consequence that no one predicted. When the USSR dissolved, the new Russian Federation made a decision that changed everything. They initiated privatization. Overnight, the state handed the ownership of the apartments to the tenants. Dmitry and Elena were given the deed to their 18-square-meter phenol trap. They became homeowners.
This sounds like a victory, but it was the final curse. They were now the owners of a ruining asset. They couldn't sell it. No one wanted to buy a known stink house. They couldn't exchange it. The Obman system was gone, replaced by a brutal cash market where prices were denominated in US dollars. They were anchored to the bottom of the new capitalist society by the very concrete that was supposed to uplift them. Now, let's flash forward to today. It is 2025. You are standing in Moscow. If you go to the site of the old ZIL factory, you won't find the trucks or the welders. The factory, once a city within a city, has been demolished. In its place stands a new district called ZIL Art. It is a landscape of gleaming glass and steel skyscrapers. They are marketed as business-class living. The price for a 2-room apartment here is 25 million rubles, an amount that would take the average modern Russian worker decades to earn. But if you look closely at the marketing brochures, you see the ghosts of 1975. They sell compact studios, 11 square meters. They promise European comfort. They offer mortgage programs that last 30 years.
The terminology has changed, but the math remains cruel. The sanitary norm has been replaced by the market rate. The waiting list has been replaced by the mortgage. And what about the Series 2-49 houses? What about the concrete dreams of the Brezhnev era? They are being erased. The Moscow government has launched a massive program called Renovatsiya. They are demolishing the 5-story Khrushchevkas and the 9-story panel blocks. They're tearing down the districts of the mud era. On paper, this looks like progress. They are replacing old, crumbling stock with new, modern towers. But walk down Open Highway in Metrogorodic today. Watch the excavators tearing into the side of a Series 2-49. As the steel jaws crunch into the concrete, a cloud of dust puffs out. It is the dust of 1975. It contains the asbestos, the old cement, and yes, the traces of phenol. And look at the people standing behind the construction fences, watching their childhood homes be destroyed. They are not cheering. They are terrified. They are being moved into the new towers, massive 30-story giants that the locals call Chelovayaniki, human anthills. These new buildings are built by migrant labor, working in storm conditions, using the cheapest materials available. The residents whisper that the walls and the new towers are paper thin. They say the elevators break down constantly. They say the ventilation hums. The cycle has closed a perfect loop.
Dmitry Sokolov passed away in 1998, shortly after the financial crash that wiped out his pension. He died of kidney failure, a condition his doctors linked to long-term chemical exposure. Elena is still alive. She is 82. She still lives in Metrogorodok, in a new flat provided by the renovation program. She sits by her window on the 22nd floor. She looks out over the sprawling, gray metropolis. The city is unrecognizable. The neon signs of supermarkets and banks light up the smog. But the feeling is the same. She remembers the hook that started this entire story, the promise of a separate apartment, a private sanctuary. She realizes now that the Soviet experiment wasn't about housing people. It was about storing them. They were stored in dormitories like spare parts. They were stored in queues like data on a tape. They were stored in panel blocks like grain in a silo. And today, in the new capitalist Russia, they are stored in mortgage-backed securities and 30-story vertical townships. The concrete dream was never about the dream. It was always about the concrete.
The final image of our story is not of a crumbling building, but of a fresh one. Go to the outskirts of Moscow, past the old ring road, to the new developments rising in the muddy fields of the Moscow region. It is evening. The lights are coming on. You see a young man, about 32 years old, the same age Dmitry was in 1975. He is carrying a box of IKEA furniture. He is walking across a line of wooden planks laid over the mud because the pavement hasn't been finished yet. He enters the building. The elevator isn't working, so he walks up the stairs. The stairwell is dusty with construction debris. He enters his apartment. It is a white box, bare concrete walls waiting for renovation. He has a 30-year mortgage. He has a job that barely covers the payments. He has a pregnant wife waiting in the car. He walks to the window and looks out at the sea of cranes on the horizon. He puts his hand on the wall. He feels the cold, damp concrete. He smiles. He thinks he has made it. He thinks the wait is over. He doesn't know that the concrete is still wet. He doesn't know that the mud era never ended. He is Dmitry, and the wait has just begun.